In the grand palaces of Joseon, love was a dangerous thing. A king was never meant to love. But sometimes, the threads of fate weave a different story. This is the story of King Jongjo, a ruler known for his strength, his sharp mind, and his cold, stoic heart. But at the center of his heart was one woman, Uibin. Not a queen, not a noble, just a court lady who captured the heart of a king. Their love defied the rules of the palace, and even time itself. A love so profound that centuries later, when the dust of history settled, her name still remains. Not because she was written in official records, but because he refused to forget her. This is not just a story about a king. It's a story about love, loss, and a man who, even as a king, was left powerless in the face of love. This is the love story of Jongjo and Uibin. Long before she became Uibin, she was just Songdok-im, a girl with no title and no name anyone cared to remember. She was born a commoner in the rigid world of Joseon, where your fate was never truly yours. Back then, a single debt could destroy a family, a poor harvest, a bad loan, and you could wake up the next day sold off, not by strangers, but by your own parents, just to survive. For Dak-im, fate flipped that coin, and somehow she landed on the fortunate side. Her father once served as the butler to Lady Haegyong, a woman with power and her own tragic story. When bankruptcy swallowed her family whole, it was Lady Haegyong who extended a lifeline. She took Dak-im in, not out of pity, but because she saw something worth saving. And so, Dak-im started her life as an apprentice court lady at the age of 10. Now, who exactly was Lady Haegyong? She was the widow of the ill-fated Crown Prince Sado, a man executed by his own father. And more importantly, she was the mother of Crown Prince Yi-san, the very man who would one day become King Jongjo. So how exactly did Dak-im and Yi-san meet? Although there are no records on how they met, there are some theories that are worth looking at. The first possibility is that they met outside the palace walls at Yi-san's maternal family residence. Yi-san was buddies with his cousins and even sent a letter to his aunt to give his socks that he had outgrown to one of them. And somewhere in that very house, Dak-im lived with her father, who worked with the family. It's not hard to imagine little Dak-im watching from a corner, or perhaps even playing nearby, her fate quietly brushing against his, long before either of them understood what destiny had planned. If they hadn't met when Yi-san visited his cousins, the other possibility is meeting within the palace walls, after Dak-im became an apprentice court lady. Yi-san and his mother might have lived in separate palace quarters, but there were visits, and this is possibly when he first laid eyes on the young girl who was going to keep him on chokehold forever. When they first met, Yi-san didn't see her as a servant or a court lady, but as someone who carried the poise of a noble. And just like that, Dak-im became the queen of young Yi-san's heart, even though Yi-san had a queen by this time. By the time Yi-san was barely 10, his fate was sealed by a politically arranged marriage, just like every royal child before him. His bride was Queen Hyoi, a girl he barely knew. This was the custom at the time. In Joseon, royal marriages were seen as a duty. So princes and princesses were wed young, most times before they even understood what marriage truly meant. They then lived with their spouses, but in separate quarters till the ritual of adulthood, which usually comes when they are 15. This was such a huge deal, and it was formally known as the coming-of-age ceremony. Only then were they expected to share a bed and fulfill their duties as husband and wife. But for Yi-san, those early years of marriage were cold. The palace was a battlefield, and politics turned his heart bitter. He had to deal with an obsessive aunt and manipulative officials. So by the time he was a teenager, he didn't just grow indifferent, he grew to despise his wife. Maybe it wasn't just politics that kept him away from his wife. Maybe it was because his heart was already set on someone else. And that someone was Dak-im. His actions really proved this. The moment he came of age and was free to take a concubine, he went straight to her. Now, you have to understand why this was special. In those times, it was customary to send his message through a messenger, or better still, through a royal order. But Yi-san chose to do things differently. At that moment, he wasn't the crown prince. He was just a boy desperately confessing to the girl who'd quietly lived in his heart all those years. He was 15. She was 14. And with his heart thumping in its cage, he asked her to be his. But Dak-im crushed his expectations with a simple word: no. Officially, her reason was simple. The crown princess had not yet given birth, and it would be improper to accept his grace. But there was another truth that lingered. She'd seen what happened to Crown Prince Sado, how his reckless desires destroyed him, and how King Yeongjo's wrath crushed their family. She'd lived close enough to Lady Haejong to know love in the palace was a dangerous thing. And above all, how could she, a girl raised by Lady Haejong, betray both her and future Queen Hyeoi? For Dak-im, that proposal wasn't a dream come true. It was a curse, a choice between love and survival. And so she walked away, leaving the crown prince with a heart full of longing and a love he wasn't ready to let go of. Rejecting a king or crown prince was unheard of in Joseon. For a court maid, it could mean death. Yet, Dak-im did the unthinkable by saying no. Maybe it was because she knew him, knew his heart. After all, they'd known each other for years. Maybe she trusted that Yi-san, unlike his father, wouldn't force his way, even if he could. And she was right. The crown prince stepped back. He understood her intention and didn't press the matter further. That moment, quiet, unseen, said more about Yi-san than any royal title. He wasn't like his father, known for forcing his way with court ladies and even attempting to be intimate with his sister. He wouldn't ruin what he felt for her by turning it into an order. He respected that Dak-im wasn't just a court lady, but a property belonging to the king, whether she shared his bed or not. Yi-san showed wisdom by showing restraint, as this wasn't just about love, but him surviving in the ruthless palace. His father, Crown Prince Sado, had been destroyed by obsession. Yi-san knew better. At that time, Yi-san was walking on a tightrope. Well, he had no choice. The court was full of enemies waiting for him to slip, and his only shield was his grandfather, King Yeongjo. Yeongjo, the same king who once ordered his own son's death, was now his grandson's protector. Yi-san owed him everything, and he knew it. When Yeongjo fell ill, Yi-san became more than a prince. He became a caretaker, a scholar of medicine, desperate to save the old king's life. He even wrote a medical book of his own, pouring everything he learned into it. But no matter how close they were, Yi-san knew one thing. If Yeongjo ever suspected him of following in Sado's crazy footsteps, it would all be over. And taking a lowborn concubine at 15? That wasn't something Yeongjo would approve of. Yeongjo wanted the perfect Confucian crown prince, disciplined, emotionless, untouchable. So Yi-san let Dak-im go, for now. And then came another problem. His aunt, Princess Hwawan's obsession only got worse. She watched his every move, suffocating him under the guise of love. Her jealousy was so extreme. It wasn't just women she envied. She was jealous of even the books he read. She wanted to be his world. And when Yi-san distanced himself from his own mother to stay by King Yeongjo's side, Princess Hwawan seized the moment, inserting herself as his mother. Her obsession only further hurt Yi-san's relationship with his wife. She made sure no woman, not even his own wife, got close. She watched the court maids waiting for him to slip, waiting for a reason to crush whoever dared steal his heart. And so, trapped between duty, obsession, and survival, Yi-san buried his feelings, until the day he could finally make her his. Fast forward some 9 years later, Yi-san officially became King Jeongjo after the passing of his grandfather. The ladies in the palace were finally his, and he could go for his love at last. But Jeongjo didn't. He gave Dak-im time. Besides, he had so many battles to fight within the palace. He ordered his ambitious aunt, Princess Hwawan, to kill herself, but she just exiled herself instead and was reduced to the position of a commoner. Jeongjo had eyes on his maternal family, who weren't acting properly at the time. He also had to painfully send his half-brothers into exile multiple times. By then, Jeongjo was childless, and the royal court was growing restless. His right-hand man, Hong Guk-young, saw an opportunity. If Jeongjo couldn't produce an heir, the power vacuum would swallow them all. So Hong came up with a plan, a ruthless one. He blocked Queen Hyeoi's fertility treatments, controlling even the royal physician, all to make room for his own sister. He pushed her forward, determined to plant her right next to the king, not just as any concubine, but as the highest-ranked bin. He then personally gave her the title One Bin, one meaning the first. Now this was a direct insult to Queen Hyeoi, the legal wife. But Hongukyeong's ambitious plans came to a sharp end when his sister died less than a year after becoming a concubine. This didn't stop the man, though. He tried to have Jongjo's half-brother's son adopted as his sister's child, clinging to power like a man possessed. Jongjo knew his right-hand man was overstepping, but he waited for the right opportunity to kick him out. Soon, the pressure to produce an heir grew unbearable. Another concubine selection was held. One Jongjo openly resisted. Still, duty won. In 1780, Lady Yoon Wabin entered the palace. That same year, Jongjo did something unthinkable. He proposed to Dak-im. Again, despite the rejection years ago, despite his rise from powerless crown prince to the most powerful man in Joseon, his feelings never changed. But once again, Dak-im said no. It wasn't pride. It wasn't ambition. It was the same impossible situation. How could she accept him now, right after the court had chosen a woman whose sole purpose was to bear him an heir? Dak-im knew her place. She was still trapped, stuck between loyalty and the man she couldn't have. Still, this was no longer the young prince she'd rejected years ago. Jongjo was now the king, the most powerful man in the land. A single word from him could end lives, ministers, nobles, enemies, anyone. But not her. For Jongjo, rejection was something he'd never faced. Yet this simple courtmaid rejected him not once, but twice. And still, he waited. 15 long years. Any other king could have forced a woman into his palace. But Jongjo didn't. Instead, his patience, or perhaps his love, became his greatest weakness. Dak-im wasn't just another woman to him. She was the only one he chose, willingly, wholeheartedly, in his entire life. And no, Jongjo didn't punish Dak-im. He couldn't. He loved her too much. Instead, he punished her subordinate court ladies, a message without words. And somewhere, somehow, Dak-im finally caved. This was never about producing an heir, even though they were 30 years of age, practically middle-aged in that era. To Jongjo, Dak-im wasn't just a fleeting crush. She was a love that lasted a lifetime. Dak-im was just as remarkable as he was. Wise, graceful, generous. The only woman who truly understood him. The only one he allowed into his heart. By then, Lady Yoon Hwabin was already pregnant, expected to give birth within months, yet fate had other plans. Dak-im, still only a special court lady, not even an official concubine, was also carrying Jongjo's child. And then, it happened. In the 6th year of Jongjo's reign, the heir everyone had been waiting for was finally born, not to a noble lady, but to a court maid, Dak-im. Her name began appearing in official records, rough drafts, and court diaries, a rare honor for any woman, especially a concubine. Only 2 women in Joseon's history had their personal names recorded this way, Jang Ok-jung and Song Dak-im. She became the talk of the court. Whispers spread, not just about her, but about the king's hidden love, the woman he guarded so fiercely from the world's eyes. Until then, no one truly knew when their relationship had begun. Jongjo had been so careful, so secretive, protecting her from the world. Unlike any king before him, Jongjo had never kept a favored concubine. All others were chosen by the court. Noble daughters brought in to bear him sons. But with Dak-im, everything was different. Just 2 months after their son's birth, Dak-im was elevated to the highest rank, Bin. And unlike others, it wasn't the court that named her. It was Jongjo himself. Ui, meaning, as it should be, meant to be, peaceful, warm, beautiful. It was everything he felt for her, wrapped into one name. And after she became his concubine, he never touched another woman. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. That was how fiercely Jongjo loved her. Perhaps, in his eyes, loving her was the only thing that mattered. After years of longing, they were finally together. To show his devotion to her, he built her a home. Not just any home, a brand new residence nestled right between his office and his bedroom. For a king, that was the ultimate display of affection. It meant she was always within reach. Whenever he missed her, he could visit. No distance, no formalities, just the two of them, as close as their hearts had always been. After waiting half his life, imagine the passion he must have felt. The day after his son was born, Jongjo did something no king had ever done. He ordered a brand new palace for the little prince. There were already places meant for crown princes, like Joseonjan, the same halls where his own father, Prince Sado, once lived and suffered. But Jongjo didn't want his son to grow up under the shadow of tragedy, so he built Jeonghidang, right near his office, and near Weibin's residence, right at the heart of the palace. He filled it with astronomical instruments, scientific tools, everything a curious young prince might need. A father, dreaming of his son's bright future. And Weibin, she received the best of everything from Zhangzhou. In Joseon, court ladies turned concubines were always treated less than noble consorts, but not Dak-im, not his Weibin. Love was in the air, and naturally Weibin became pregnant once more. By then, Zhangzhou practically lived in her quarters. He worked there, laughed there, shared every moment with her. Those days were their happiest. Their baby boy babbling nearby, another life growing inside her, laughter filling the air. Whenever Zhangzhou was bored, he sought her company. He even threw a birthday party just for her. And somewhere in those golden days, he taught her mathematics, and she learned it in no time. Because they were equals, at least in spirit. Two brilliant minds sharing a world no one else could enter. And when their daughter was born, Zhangzhou was right there, holding her hand, smiling like the happiest man alive. He wasn't just a king that day, he was a father, proud of his son, and now his daughter. For once, it seemed like love had truly won, but happiness in the palace was always fleeting. Their baby princess, the light of their little family, died after just 2 months. And when she was gone, the world must have felt unbearably empty for both Zhangzhou and Weibin. Still, Zhangzhou, as a husband, as a father, tried his best to ease her sorrow. Just 2 months later, he did something unexpected. Their son, who was not even 2 years old, was officially named the Crown Prince of Joseon. A bold, shocking move. Because by tradition, a prince had to be at least 8 to become the heir. But Zhangzhou didn't care for traditions. That day, he declared his son the future king, and turned the whole kingdom into a celebration. He ordered grand feasts, released prisoners, and even cut taxes. It was his way of spreading the blessing, as if telling the world, here is my hope, our son, our future. Everything about the little crown prince's ceremony was carefully recorded, every ritual, every moment. Zhangzhou made sure his son's story would be remembered. Meanwhile, in a palace where jealousy often brewed, something rare blossomed. Mutual respect. Weibin and Queen Hyoe, they shared a bond. Same age. Even after becoming the mother of the future king, Weibin stayed humble. She never threatened the queen's position, never overstepped. Maybe that's why the queen cared for Weibin too. After all, by law, Weibin's children were the queen's children. And as a queen, it was her virtue not to fall into jealousy. Even Zhangzhou's mother showed kindness. When Weibin went into labor, it was the king's mother who sent her most trusted servants to help. For a brief moment, they had it all. A son crowned as heir, a family that respected one another, and dreams of a brighter future. But fate was cruel. At just 5 years old, the crown prince fell ill with measles. The royal doctors believed he was recovering, but then in a blink, he was gone. The loss shattered them. At the funeral, Weibin clung to her son's grave, her cries tearing through the air. For her, it must have felt like the world ended. Zhangzhou wrapped his beloved son's small body in his royal robes, the clothes of a king, as if to say, you were my pride, my heir, my everything. He placed him in the casket himself. But there was no time to grieve. Measles swept through the country, and Zhangzhou, as king, had to lead. Even as his heart crumbled, duty came first. Although he no doubt might have broken down when he was alone. Weibin, on the other hand, couldn't hide it. She broke. Body and soul. She was pregnant when their son died, but grief consumed her. Fearing for her health and the unborn child, Zhangzhou sent her away to another palace to recover. Back then, it was believed a change of scenery could heal the sick. 2 months later, she returned, her belly heavy with child, but her body frail, spirit barely hanging on. No one knew if she'd survive the birth. And Zhangzhou, who studied medicine, became her caretaker. Every single day, he stayed by her side. He watched over her baths. He inspected every herb, every tool used for her treatment. Nothing was too small for him to check, because this wasn't just his royal consort. This was the woman he loved, the one he couldn't lose. For Zhangzhou, caring for Weibin was his way of fighting fate, his desperate attempt to protect what little he had left. But no matter how much love, how much care Zhangzhou poured into Weibin, it wasn't enough to fight the dark future. In 1786, at just 34 years old, Weibin died, 9 months pregnant. Doctors couldn't explain why. Maybe it was toxemia, maybe her heart gave out from the grief of losing their son. Some even whispered that another royal consort, Hwabin, had poisoned her, but no one knows. And none of that mattered to Jongjo. All he knew was that the love of his life was gone. The palace fell silent. The queen wept like she'd lost her own sister. And Jongjo, the king of Joseon, finally broke down. They said his cries echoed through the palace walls. He couldn't face the world. For 20 days, he stopped everything. No royal duties, no meetings, no court, just grief. In a few short years, he'd lost everything he ever loved. His precious son, the future of Joseon, his baby daughter, and now the only woman who truly had his heart. Jongjo had always believed, maybe, just maybe, the crown prince would return to them, reincarnated as their third child. But that child died with Weebin, and with them, so did that fragile sliver of hope. Life was merciless. All Jongjo ever wanted was simple happiness, a family. But fate took it all away. His mother later wrote in her memoir that the grief hollowed him out. His body grew weak. The mighty king was just a broken man trying to survive. And yet, somehow he did. He picked himself up and became the greatest king of late Joseon. But he never, not once, forgot her. Because for Jongjo, Dak-im wasn't just a concubine. She was his equal, the woman he loved, body and soul. He couldn't bear the thought of her being erased by history. So, he did something no king of Joseon had ever done. On the back of Weebin's tombstone, Jongjo wrote her story himself. Weebin's trace will be forgotten forever. If I don't write how she was the most amazing person, who will remember her? Who will tell the world how perfect she truly was? And in her epitaph, he didn't just write a cold royal record. He poured his heart out. He wrote about who she was, the perfect woman, the love of his life, and how losing her tore him apart. No king had ever done that for a concubine. No king dared express such deep love and grief in writing. But for Weebin, he broke every rule. In the end, Jongjo buried her, not where the royal law demanded, but where his heart did, right next to their son. Even though it was illegal, he didn't care. He just wanted them to be together, in death, if not in life. And he visited them often. Their graves, the only place where he could be just a man, not a king, mourning the family fate had stolen from him. Remember that special palace Jongjo built for his son? The place meant to nurture the crown prince's future. After losing his beloved Weebin and their son, Jongjo never had the heart to change it. He turned that place into his personal office and stayed there until the day he died, surrounded by memories of what could have been. But duty doesn't wait for grief. Jongjo had no choice but to produce another heir. But imagine how hollow that must have felt, to share a bed with a stranger, chosen by others, when the love of your life was buried in the royal tombs. Eventually, Lady Subin was chosen. She bore him a son and a daughter. That boy became crown prince at 11, and later, king. Jongjo respected them, but it was never the same. He could never treat them like he did Weebin and their son, because no one could replace them. In 1800, Jongjo died at just 49. His 11-year-old son took the throne. But a child cannot rule a kingdom. Power fell into the hands of the Grand Queen Dowager, Yeongjo's young queen, the most senior in the royal family. And just like that, the policies, the dreams, the hard work Jongjo poured his soul into were revoked. Piece by piece, Joseon crumbled. Perhaps if the crown prince had survived, he might have been able to protect his father's legacy. He would have been 20 at the time. Even in his final years, Jongjo never let go of Weebin. There was no other woman, no concubine, no court lady who could fill that void. He said it himself, "I have no court maid who interests me, and this should not embarrass those who are wise. I don't like eunuchs or concubines by nature. Even if I don't push them away, I grow distant from them." The king who once ruled Joseon spent his days not with music, nor with women, but with books. Only books could comfort him in his lonely hours. Because after Dak-im, there was no one else. She wasn't just a court lady, she was the queen of his heart. And once she was gone, so was his light. King Jongjo was a man history remembers as stoic, a ruler who mastered his emotions, revealing nothing even to those closest to him. His royal records, his court diaries, they all spoke of duty, of politics, of his deep filial piety. But never love. For centuries, scholars believed that was all there was to him. A king bound by duty, never by his heart. Until One discovery in 2009 changed everything. A collection of secret letters exchanged with his trusted courtier, Shim Huanji. Only then did the world catch a glimpse of the man behind the throne, of a heart once full and later shattered. And at the center of it all was one woman, Weibin, his Dak-im. She wasn't just another consort. She was his home, his solace, the only place in the palace where he could let his guard down. Losing her meant losing the only person he could lean on. After that, even the Grand Palace felt hollow. Zhangzhou, the king who rarely showed emotions, did something no king had ever done before. He took up the brush himself and wrote her epitaph, not as a king recording history, but as a man grieving the love of his life. In those lines, he didn't hold back. He wrote the words no Joseon king dared to say out loud, "I love you," for a man who understood better than anyone the power of records. This was his final act of devotion. He knew that once gone, memories fade, names get lost, but not hers, not his Weibin. If history wouldn't remember her, then he would carve her into it himself. I used to smile while looking at you, but now there is only silence inside the palace. Why are you buried in a place where no one is around? Please, come back to the palace. He even spent nights at her shrine, because sometimes even a king just wants to be with the woman he loves. In the end, Zhangzhou was not just a great king, he was a man who loved deeply, lost painfully, and mourned quietly for the rest of his life. And maybe that's what made him truly great. Do you think Zhangzhou and Weibin deserve another life to love each other like a man and woman? I'd love to know what you think in the comment section.